listen, there's a unique situation that's brewing in Pakistan. And what is that situation? So let me explain it in a log line real quick, and then we'll break this all down. So basically, what has happened is Pakistan, as you guys know, is a nuclear powered nation. They have tremendous access to a lot of nuclear weapons, they're everywhere. And there's a lot going on with that. And basically, this nation just voted to kick out their prime minister from office. His name is Imran Khan. You've maybe heard of him, but they voted. The parliament basically casted a vote of no confidence, which is a part of the parliamentary democracy of Pakistan and of parliamentary democracies across the world, where you can, where your parliament, I think it's like a 2/3 vote, can vote to kick out the elected prime minister, and they voted. The parliament basically voted to do that. They voted to kick out their prime minister from office, Imran Khan, using a vote of no confidence, and he basically left. So he basically was forced to leave, and this is a huge deal. This is an absolutely huge deal. Why? Well, Pakistan's nuclear has a tremendous amount of nuclear resources, and they're a much more powerful country than you probably think they are. And so let's explain deeper. Like, why did Imran Khan lose power? How did we get to this point where Pakistan has a new prime minister within a matter of a week? Okay, so there's a couple key characters that I think you guys should know for the story. I think one of them is Imran Khan, who was the ousted prime minister, the prime minister that was voted out of office. There's Shehbaz Sharif, who is the new prime minister that took over after the vote of no confidence took place to kick out Imran Khan. And the third layer to this whole situation is the Pakistan army. Is the Pakistani army. And the Pakistani army, you may be wondering, like, what the hell do they have to do with anything? They're not political. But the influence that the army carries in Pakistan in particular is huge. The Pakistani army has had a huge influence over politics for about 30 to 40 years since the country's for a really long time. The people look to the generals to be the leaders more so than the government because that's just the way that influence works in some parts of the world. And the army has a tremendous influence in Pakistan, and they have a huge influence in this story. So you can kind of see where this is going. So how did we get here? I think this is the key question everybody wants to know. So some of the reasons that were cited for the vote of no confidence include against Imran Khan basically include economic mismanagement in Pakistan, mishandling of the country's foreign policy in Pakistan, and a lot of things. I mean, Pakistan's been undergoing an economic crisis for quite some time. When Imran Khan was elected, he promised to really focus in on that economic crisis and make sure that that wasn't going to be the case. Sorry, it's really bright and it looks super foggy, but the sun just started shining. Anyway, but those were some of the reasons: economic mismanagement and a lack of good handling of foreign policy. Two things that Imran Khan said he really wanted to focus on and really make better. So this is the first time in quite a while that Pakistan has actually used democratic means to kick out a leader from his position. Usually, this has happened before in Pakistan, where leaders have been taken out with no confidence, but at the same time, it's led to military coups, military action, and basically the military took over the government. So it ended up being a much more violently escalated situation. Right now, we're looking at a very soft military coup where the military had a huge influence in kicking Imran Khan out, but at the same time, they never had to really exert their force, which is very interesting. It's a different tactic comparatively to the other times that the military has used their sort of power. They've more like usually the military flexes their muscle more heavily. Here, they've kind of let the politics do the talking. So it's really strange in this sense. Imran Khan entered a situation when elected back in 2018 with the pretty weak economy of Pakistan. Obviously, with the pandemic and COVID and all of these things, it's continued to sort of go down a really bad route. And the best way to describe the Imran Khan's approach to the economic crisis in Pakistan is he chose to take short-term gains rather than combat the foundations of the economic crisis, and so that eventually led to growth in the short term and happiness for a few years, but eventually it all sort of started to crumble down and people started to realize that. So now what's Imran Khan doing after he was kicked out? Imran Khan is fighting for his political life. He's been hosting a lot of rallies throughout various big cities in Pakistan. There have been a lot of people who had his support, and his rallies have been big. And one of the main reasons that Imran Khan is citing for this for this, what's it called, vote of no confidence, is that he thinks America was against him the whole time. He thinks the United States of America has had a plot and has had agents within the Pakistan parliament that want to kick him out, and this was their whole idea all along. This was the reason that he has cited. Several journalists and also various analysts and government officials have gone on the record saying that Imran Khan is, it's a stretch, and it's definitely something that he's using to, for lack of a better word, cover his ass. So, what is the tension going on right now? What's the vibe? How are we feeling about, and how are the people feeling in Pakistan? So, like I said, Imran Khan has gone on the record in these rallies and basically tried to blame the United States for being an agent of change in in Pakistan's politics and all of these things, and that there's a U.S. backed conspiracy, blah blah blah. So, where, but like, so if he's saying all this, where do the American and Pakistani foreign policy relationships stand right now? You have an ex prime minister that's going on the record and saying these things and could possibly be elected in 2023 based on the support that he's getting. Where's the America and Pakistani foreign relationships at? Where are we at right now? Most credible sources are actually rejecting Imran Khan's claims and saying that it's, like I said, it's a lot of bogus. He's just trying to save face. And this is the weirdest part, is that Imran Khan's criticisms of the United States have intensified. They weren't like this. Actually, if you talk to a lot of people and read a lot of articles, you see that Imran Khan in the early stages of his prime ministership tenure in Pakistan was very open to working with the West. He was very open to working with Western countries. He was having meetings with President Trump at the time and Trudeau in Canada, a lot of people, and he was open to sort of westernizing Pakistan. And a lot of people were a lot of Pakistanis abroad as well as Pakistanis in Pakistan were very supportive of that he was opening up the borders and really trying to, instead of making Pakistan an insular country, expanding outward, which was something that I guess people were looking for there. And so he had met Donald Trump. He was working with the United States, but now that relationship has sort of shifted to a more hostile approach to the U.S. because, I mean, we're seeing some of the stuff that Imran Khan is going publicly and saying, and he's slowly, instead of working with countries in the West like the United States, Canada, UK, whatever, is working with countries like China and Russia. In fact, he's publicly when he was a prime minister a few weeks ago, publicly defended Russia over the Ukraine crisis. So he's been working with the more sort of ostracized powers, for lack of a better word, with China and Russia, rather than working with the Western powers like he was early in his prime ministership. So that's been sort of an interesting trend that we've also seen. Everyone's kind of shocked, I would say, is the general vibe, that the army didn't get more militarily involved. I mean, usually in Pakistan, when there's been a crisis like this, the military has been quick to flex their muscle and has been very quick to make sure that their opinion was heard by flexing militarily and taking over for a little bit, at least before the transition to power. So this has been a relatively peaceful transition of power with like an undercurrent of tension, is the best way to describe it. But I'm of just the belief that this is an important story to cover because of the fact that any country that has nuclear weapons, that has a leader that's voted out of no confidence, is huge. Particularly a leader that was relatively popular in Imran Khan and relatively popular within the Western countries as well as in Pakistan in general, even though there were these issues that were going on economically and with foreign policy and all of these things. So what is the situation like right now, today in Pakistan? What is the situation like? To be honest, it's quite tense. There hasn't been any violence, but there's a lot of political undertensions and undercurrents that are going on that's very under the surface and is not really being talked about. Shehbaz Sharif, like I was saying earlier, has taken over the position of prime minister. He's assumed responsibility for now. We'll see. He's got a lot of problems, obviously, to deal with on his plate. We'll see if he continues to just stay, like if it continues to be a peaceful transfer of power, or it's going to eventually lead to something a little greater if Imran Khan's got a retaliation. It's weirdly positive. So I feel like this is why a lot of people aren't talking about it, because there's no like military violence, or there's no like death, and there's no murder or anything like that. It's been a pretty peaceful transition of power, but a shocking one nonetheless. And a lot of people, like, I mean, I think the general vibe is that a lot of people are shocked the military didn't get involved. And Imran Khan has hit the election trail hard. He's going to try to re-campaign for 2023. I believe is when Pakistan's general elections are in the August of 2023. So he's going to continue to personally attack the Pakistani military as he's been doing, and attack the United States as well as the ruling party, because his party basically got kicked out after he was taken out of office. So he's continuing his personal attacks and trying to get back to power. Will he get back to power? I mean, only time will tell. We will see. He does have a decent amount of popularity within the country, so it's going to be very interesting to see what the reelection looks like. So, but honestly, this is one of those things that's kind of like an instant reaction, right? He was kicked out of office. The Shehbaz Sharif has officially presumed power of prime ministership in Pakistan. This is just going to be one of those things that develops over time. We're going to find out more information. We're going to see if Imran Khan continues this sort of momentum and tries to really take back the power of trying to what's it called? If he really tries to take back the power and continue to become a I lost words. Sorry, but if he continues to become a power, or if he continues to want to become an elected leader once again, it's a very tricky situation, very tricky waters to navigate. But we will see what happens with the situation. In terms of my opinion, I don't really have an opinion on this. Quite honestly, Imran Khan, from what I knew, at least in the 4 or 5 years of just being like talking to people and talking to people. When I mean by people, I'm talking to like Pakistani friends of mine, Pakistani uncles, aunties, whatever, and they were pretty pro him. But obviously there was issues under the surface that maybe weren't being talked about as well. So we will see how this whole thing develops, and we will see how this whole thing goes because it's interesting. But anyway.